killed. Everybody we done saw murdered. Just about every one of them done been the real Christians. They, look, take Pelagian. Pelagius, all his writings were burnt because he says that man has a free will. Because he says that sin is an individual act. Because he focuses on the responsibility of humans in their own life to obey God. And he is considered a heretic because he doesn't say that man is not responsible for the sinful condition in Adam is. And like, no, yeah, Adam messed up. Adam did a lot. Adam caused a great deal of problems, but you causing some problems too. No, you a sinner too, and so I feel like a lot of the great thinkers, they have been erased over time. They've
I'd
been
agree.
totally erased.
I'd agree.
So, since we're in this, I've got a couple of questions to get to y'all, um, and y'all can comment as you like. Well, first of all, I'm jumping off of like Romans chapter number 8. It says that the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, right? But because of the sin of Adam, right? And and shortly after that, it talks about the creature being in the bondage of corruption. Okay, which is the result of Adam's sin. All right.
I'm not agreeing with nothing you're saying yet. I'm just making. I'm saying yes because I want you to. I'm listening to the point you're making. Then I'll get to it.
Well, that's kind of the main point. So, and I think that the confusion of original sin with that is what a lot of regular lay people would be. They say you say original sin to a layperson, they're thinking, yeah, Adam sinned, and we have all this death and destruction and everything that happens, and you know, corruption in the world, and it's all going to be delivered at some point because of what Jesus did to deal with, the sin of mankind. Um, and I would go to those verses and say that, not that it's original sin, but that would be the understanding of most. Now, once you get into the theologians part of it, they're saying something different. But what is the meaning of what David said? In sin did my mother conceive me.
Oh yeah.
And then the question, which is not straight from Scripture, uh, do we sin because we're sinners, or are we sinners because we sin?
So I want to answer those. I can answer those questions. I think for one, when we hear the term original sin, which was developed under Calvinistic points of view, maybe Calvin wasn't alive then, but Augustinian view, which is built off of Calvin's work. I mean, what Calvin's work is built off of. The term original sin basically says that it's basically saying that because of what Adam did in the garden, man can no longer respond to God at all. He's a sinner and therefore is unable to respond to God's goodness and grace without God first uh, 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 creating an effectual call. And that is the point of original sin. That's the only reason why they use that term. It has no other purpose, like you may be using, saying that, hey, what came first, the chicken or the egg here? Sin, being a sinner that sins, or someone that's however you just said it. I like to say the chicken before the egg. You know, but,
Do we
but,
sin
but, but
because we're sinners, or do we become sinners when we sin?
so I'm gonna answer that question a little bit later, but I'll start off by saying when you talk about Psalm 51, I believe we're talking about. But what's
In
wrong with that
sin
Psalm?
did my mother deceive me? I forget the verse. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
right,
probably
right.
right. Yeah.
So I believe that when it's saying in sin, again, this is supposition because I don't know that we know what the verse says or means other than supposition. I think both sides have to make a supposition here, and my supposition would be that David is saying that he is a legitimate child. And I believe that to be the case. I believe that to be the case, that he's an illegitimate child and he's being mistreated and miss and miss and that's why we see how the story unfolds with David not even being brought in as one of the sons. All the sons are brought in, and David is not in the consideration. So I do believe that David is illegitimate, and I think that's what explains that verse as pertains to him, his being born in sin. And I believe that the verse bears it out. Again, supposition, but I think every interpretation is going to be supposition on that in that verse. And then as it pertains is what came first, whether it be the chicken or the egg. Well, we already know that Adam sins, and when Adam sins, we already know that now man has the ability to do right, because this is what God says to what's the guy's name, to Cain. He's saying, Cain, listen, you don't have to do evil. You don't have to do what's wrong. You can do what's right, but you're gonna choose what's wrong. And when you do, sin will lie at the door. Meaning that man has a choice whether to sin or not. But because he now has the knowledge of good and evil, he makes that determination of whether he is sin or not. And because he makes that determination without the Spirit of God, because we know that he has not the Spirit of God, he's gonna make it according to his own flesh. And I think that is where what we come to. I believe that Adam passed the gene of death on to all of us, but the ability to sin and the ability to do what's wrong was also something that now is inherent, because Adam has to teach his children, and his children now will have that also, that knowledge of what's good and right. So I believe that you know that the ability to do wrong and the ability to do right is in the person. That's free will. If man is a sinner and he has no choice but to commit sin, then he has no way, I would say, in the same way the Calvinists would say, he has no way to come to God. That's why I don't agree with original sin. If he is a sinner, and again, we philosophizing again, that's what I hate about this, is if a man is a sinner, how can he then come to God? If it's not of his own free will that he's a sinner. So it's not of his own free will that he died, but it's of his own free will that he sins. And that's what I believe, because it's of Christ's own free will that he does not sin. And so if Christ cannot sin, then so could we. That's my position. Whatever Christ did, we could do. We just don't. That's what makes him different and set apart from us.
Okay. Anything to add, Carleaf?
I was just going to ask about Romans 5:12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned.
Yeah,
How
I
do you
agree.
s- how do you square that circle?
You asking me or Carly or Don?
No, no, I'm asking you because
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
you've thought about this.
yeah. So that verse is exactly what I'm talking about. Where's that? Romans 5. Let me read it again. I'll read
Yeah,
it. Read
five
it
5:12.
twelve.
as I interpret it. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world. I agree. One man caused sin to enter into the
Into
world,
the world.
because we don't know what sin is until Adam does it, right? And what is sin? Right? He disobeyed God. He didn't have faith in what God said. So now sin is entered into the world. And look at this. And death by sin. So now sin has caused death. Right? Now this the key. And so death passed upon men. Not sin. Sin didn't pass upon men, but death passed to all men, for that all have sinned. And then that's the key there. All have sinned. So they have sinned. Not that Adam has sinned. Adam did sin and bring sin into the world. But guess what? He passed death for the ability to commit sin. So now that you commit sin, you have sinned. Now you also have inherited death. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there is no law. Right? So, right, there is no law, but yet men keep dying for all these years. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned as the similitude of Adam's transgression. Right? Who is the figure of him to come? But not as the offense. So is also the gift. Right? this comes now down to Christ. Let's just look at it in terms of Christ now. How does one get righteousness? Does one get righteousness because one has to believe on Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the one who is the righteous one, but there must be something that we got to do in order to inherit that righteousness. We don't just get it automatically because he died for us. We have to believe it. We have to
Make a
we have to
choice.
obey it unto faith, in a sense. So so Adam and Jesus, I think, picture, and again, I could be wrong, but I think Adam and Jesus picture this exact thing, but opposite. Adam causes sin. Adam is not my federal head because he sinned. I'm on the same baseball team or the same basketball team. No, it's not like that. He sins, and because of his sin, now I'm gonna. He is my father, so I'm learning from him. I then become a sinner. I then make those same choices, and so again, how else would we describe the innocent, the ones who don't know anything about Christ, that don't know about that don't ever hear the death, burial, and resurrection? The only way we can explain a baby dying, in my opinion, again, it's philosophy and not the verse. The only way we can explain the baby dying is that they don't understand the difference between right and wrong and sin. Paul said this in this same context. He said, before the law came, I was alive. Then the law came, sin
Sin
revived,
revived, and I
and
died.
I died. But again, I might be looking at that all wrong. But again, that's just again, I believe I could be susceptible to error here because I'm only vetting with y'all right now. So y'all can call me wrong or right, and then we can have some discussion on it. But
Don, thoughts? You seem deep in thought over there.
Well, that's where I'm going over to chapter 8 and see the connection of of that with the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. Um, and for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth and pain together until now. When Adam sinned, and you go back to Genesis, and God didn't only say, "Okay, you sinned, and this is going to happen to you," but he sinned and said, "The cursed is the ground for thy sake. It's going to bring forth, briars and thistles, and it won't yield its strength anymore, and so forth." So that's the corruption I can see. And I'm not saying original sin in the same way any of those theologians would use it, or even using that as the term, but corruption through the sin of Adam, or death passing upon all men, death entering the world by Adam's sin. Now, referencing that verse where it says that um, uh, I was
well,
alive without the.
what point you was
Sorry, go
making
ahead.
with the verse? What's the point you was making with the verse just now?
The corruption that came upon the whole creation
Mm-hmm.
through Adam's sin. Adam sinned, and corruption came upon all of creation.
And I agree. I still agree with that statement.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now, but using the verse that you said, and just having heard it, and remembering it, um, I'm trying to quote it again. I was alive without without the law, or something like that,
Yeah.
once.
Mm-hmm.
But when the law came, sin
Sin
revived,
revived, and I
and I
died.
died. Now, sin revived. Does that mean in some way sin is then dormant in us before that? So we do have sin. We have the corruption itself is an inclination to sin, not the nature of sin necessarily. We use words and they become buzz terms. But
What
does
the
that
Bible?
word revive intend that it's there,
Where
waiting
we?
for when we are able to recognize the law for what it is?
So So if
So it sounds like Don, just to interject a little bit, that you're making the biblical point of sin and how it transitions, as to where the Calvinists are making an extra biblical point.
Yeah,
I think that's the point you're
I
making.
would say,
Like
yeah,
Darius,
like you said
like Darius is not
earlier,
wrong.
you start
They're just
saying it,
making
it's
an
like,
extra
I
biblical.
understand that, but you go that next step, and they're like, whoa, I think you went beyond what the Bible teaches. Like, and there's another place that would connect to this. Is sin revived and I died. Sin that for in my and I know that in me, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. Sin dwelleth in me. Just a little bit later, is that's talking about the same. It's in somewhat the same context. Not immediate, but it's a little ways down that argument. Is he really saying the same thing? Is he saying there is sin in us?
so
I don't usually argue from this because it does sound more like philosophy, and there's so few verses that would support it. You maybe take what David said, "I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me," and say, "Okay, we're corrupt because of those." If we don't go the other interpretation route that you used, if I say it means something else, we don't have a lot of verses in the Old Testament try to explain what that means, except maybe it means this, that the sin of our forefathers, the corruption that comes from that, is inherent in us. It exists. It may even be our inclination when the law comes. Now that gets a little bit tougher to say, but we know that we dwell in corruption, in the
okay, then,
bondage of corruption.
so let's think about what you're saying here. What sin would a baby, let's say a 5-year-old,
Hmm.
let's say a 1-year-old be guilty of? What makes them particularly a sinner?
But see, I don't think I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don. I don't think Don is making that point. I think Don is actually making your same point
Right.
and just saying that the Calvinists are arguing extra biblical. Like the propensity to choose this thing is here with us because, as you said, now we have the knowledge of good
Okay,
and evil. So
okay.
that propensity, that penchant toward evil is there. Why? Well, we're not God. None of us are God. It's not like this spiritualist movement. Oh, you can become gods. No, given the choice, you're probably going to choose the wrong thing. That's what's going to happen. And maybe that is, to your point, Darius, more of Adam sinned. The corruption is there with him. So he is not whole. So how could he then have a child and raise a child whole when he's not whole?
Right.
What is he going to impart to his child? It's going to be partial knowledge.
And this is why it's important that the father is teaching the son.
Right.
This is important why Jesus is the son and the father is teaching. He has
Right.
not been taught by man. He's been taught by God. And in fact, in which he is taught by God, he then begins to teach man. So again, I think that sin inherently is taught by us. It's taught by us from Adam. He was corrupted. He took upon himself the knowledge. He didn't have this physical change in his body, like people try to say. I do believe that the connection that he had was spiritual with God, but I believe that, and I don't believe that they physically, we're always physically looking at their bodies. I think that in a sense, that's why there was no lust for his wife, I think, in a sense. But I think that when they took off the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it was exactly what man is doing right now today, pursuing knowledge. Every step in our life, if we want to be successful, has something to do with what we know. If you want to get a bachelor's degree, you got to know some things about engineering. You got to go to school. And if you want to get a master's degree, you got to now research a particular area in that engineering thing that you want to be considered a master of it. And then if you want a doctorate of philosophy, you got to add to the human knowledge base, right? Because that's what this is really off of. It's about what we know. And so when Adam took off that tree, I believe this is when he understood the law of God. I believe this is when he knew what was really right and wrong to do. And then I believe this is when he knew what he wanted to do versus what he thought was right or wrong. And he
Mm.
made himself equal with God at that point. I believe that over time, man disregarded what that law was, and God then put it into a stone that is representative of him making it into something that's unbreakable, although men found a way to break it. And then not only that, I think that men were so corrupt that if they could take God's very words, if they could take God's very words so that they would not have to worry about sin, they would kill it. And that's what Jesus Christ represents. Jesus Christ is a representation of man literally killing the very words of God. God himself, man knows that they are killing God in this sense. Because man saying we are not living under these rules and regulations. They took what happened at the Mount Sinai, and they said, no way. We love darkness rather than light, because our deeds are evil, and we know it. Man began to love their sin, but there are some who don't love it. There are some who say, you know what? I believe this story about Jesus. I believe that I'm wicked and evil. And even though sin is ready to do something, sin is ready to pounce, sin is lying at the door, according to the Genesis statement. We that who see and understand that, we believe what God says and we trust him. That's why I don't agree with the Calvinistic point of view. I'm still mishearing Don, because it seems like to me Don is saying that, and maybe you provide some clarity, Khalid, but it seems like Don is saying to me that, and Don, you correct me, but that we are inherently sinners and have inherited sin from our forefathers.
Well,
That's what I.
I'm asking if that indicates it in any way. Okay, so again, going back to David said, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Okay,
And,
and let's go one other step on this. When we go back to the Levitical law, and a woman has a child, whether a male child or a female child, and has a time of separation, and then brings an offering for purification after
Mhm.
so many days, 40 days or 80 days. And that is called a sin offering. In what way is there sin there in that circumstance? Is a good question.
Well,
Um,
I can talk about. I think I could talk to this. And is it to call it a sin offering?
yes, it
Uh,
calls it a sin offering.
yeah. Let me make sure. But I can talk to the fact of her uncleanness at this point.
Well, I could say I could understand it if it just said uncleanness and it was a purification offering or something like that. But it actually does call it a sin offering. And so it's pulling that word in there. Now, does that mean that the word sin maybe goes a little further? Our normal understanding of sin is that disobedience against God, breaking the law of God knowledgeably, that sort of thing. I understand that. But does sin also include something which may mean a proclivity toward evil, or I don't even have a great definition for it? And is that then what the Bible might be indicating again by that use of the word when the law came? I'd have to go to the verse to quote it exactly. Sin revived and I died. Sin revived and I died. Does that mean we have it in us? Now, of course, later on, I believe it's in that chapter, it says clearly, you know, in my flesh dwelleth no good thing. That's sin that dwelleth in my flesh.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Uh,
I'll get the Leviticus 12 right now. So
okay.
bear with me.
And I'm trying to find, um, where's that verse at? Is that chapter 8 or chapter 9?
Chapter 12.
No, I'm talking
Oh,
about Romans.
but sin revived, and
Yeah.
I think it's 7.
Yeah, oh, wretched man that I am. Okay.
Let me-
For sin taking occasion by the commandment deceived me, and by it slew me. All right. And before that, verse 9, for I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived, and I died.
So
Uh,
I'll ask a
verse number
question.
8, but sin taking occasion by the commandment wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, for without the law sin was dead. But
I'll
then
ask a
sin
question,
revived.
somewhat philosophical, and there may or may not be any end to exploring this. But is it possible for anyone to not sin, like ever?
So if you can imagine a boy being raised by a pack of dogs, and what that what sin could he commit? What laws could he break? What laws could Adam truly break if he don't eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? He naked. Eve would have had a baby at some point, and they wouldn't have had no offering for sin. And he's naked in the garden, and we know that being naked is a sin.
Right.
We know that he can't just be out in the open in the naked in his nakedness. Especially in front of God, because that's the problem. What happened with, walking up, if they walking up the stairs of the temple and they nakedness be shown, they be put to death, they sin, right? But yeah, Adam is in this situation where he obviously is doing something that later on is considered wrong, but it's not wrong in this particular situation. So I don't believe that God is looking. Adam is in a situation where blessed is the man into whom God will not impute sin.
Sin.
Me, you
Right.
can do whatever we want in Christ, according to Paul, and not ever be convicted of sin or convinced of sin. Like there's nothing I can do that will bring wrath of God to hell on my life because I have believed on Christ. Adam is in that situation. Adam's in that situation until he transgressed against God. And I believe that every man is in that situation until they do transgress against God. I believe that's the situation that they in. They in a situation where that you know I see today there are people who have Down syndrome and they already know about fornication. They know about lying, and they handicapped. And so, what excuse can they really have in Christ? They driving, they going on dates, they having interviews, they making money. What excuse can that person really have? Not one. And
None.
so
Yeah.
what we saying is, but there are ones who never talk. I got a little niece, a cousin, who ain't never talked in her life. Ain't never. And sin has caused the problems in her life. They have caused all of the things that she is suffering in her life. Sin has caused it. I 100% agree with that. But she has no ability to trust on our Savior. There's none. Nobody can ever explain to her the death, burial, and the resurrection. She would never be able to understand that in her life. So what do we do about her? Christ had to still die for her. He still had to die
Right.
for her. But what do we do about it?
Yeah. I think what we do about her is the same thing that David said about his son, who the kid he had with Bathsheba, who died. He's like, I'll see him again.
So that means that they could commit sin and God will not impute it on them.
Uh I don't know if
Well, I mean, that's the question. I guess it's being asked right now: are they
yeah.
able to commit sin actually if the law is not entered? I mean, I guess the conscience is not active, because that's what you get into the question of who knows what. How
Right.
old is the age of accountability for a normal child, and then the mentally handicapped? I think there's all kinds of differences between those handicaps.
But that
Uh,
to interject real quick, that goes back to what Darius said about Adam. Adam was naked. That's a sin, but he was good there, but there was no law there. So the
Well,
law
I don't
wasn't
know. If they
there.
were the only two people, it was their house, so I'm okay with
Then,
that.
then why then why did God cover them? We get back to why God covers them
Because the
because he agrees.
babies were on the way. Then
No, it wasn't no baby on the way. God agrees with Adam with his assessment. I should not have been naked in front of you. Well, who told you I was naked in front of me? Have you eaten off the tree? Well, yeah. Okay, well, you know what? I better cover you up because you're right.
I understand. So well, I would now that goes to my next question. Then is this: if we're looking at us and saying, okay, I was alive without the law once, whatever I was doing without the law, without the commandment coming, I was alive. And when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. And it and the verses immediately following is like it by this sin it slew me. This overcame. This is it became a exceeding sinful because of what I know about the law after that. So we could look at that and say that that may apply to Adam in a sense there. But did Adam had the ability to sin? We can agree with that whatever way we want to say it.
I would say that Adam, the only sin that Adam could commit is Adam couldn't commit adultery.
That's
It's
all I'm
impossible.
saying. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying that he
Yeah,
had the ability to sin against God, to disobey the commandment of God that he had.
he did. He had the ability to disobey what that one thing God told him.
Hmm.
Other than that, Adam couldn't do no other wrongs
But
because there.
but you are saying then at the same time, like right after that, say, oh wait a minute, now I'm naked, so that's wrong too. In addition to what the only thing that he was told was wrong.
Right, because now he knows exactly what's right or wrong. Romans helps us
Yeah.
explain that the law of God is written in our hearts. So when man realizes, look what it say. It say, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him is what? Sin.
Sin.
When a man know what's the right thing to do and don't do it, then to him is sin. God gives Moses the law, but yet before God ever gave Moses the law, Moses is saying to to his brothers, why y'all fighting with each other? Why you doing this to each other? You shouldn't do this to each other. What I'm saying is at some point the law of God has been written on the heart of man,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just it. That's just point blank it. And then when man realizes the difference between right and wrong, whatever that time may be,
Right.
whenever it may happen in their life, that is when I believe they are fully equipped, fully funded, fully ready to go, straight up on the team of Satan and ready to fight in his army. And our
Mm-hmm.
job is to help bring the light in the dark place that they at. We have been enlightened, and now we're trying to enlighten them that Satan is the father of lies, that you
Right.
fight on the wrong team. Like, you don't have to be on his team. You're not even naturally supposed to be on his team. Matter of fact, you ain't even on his team. He's just using you as a frontline soldier to make sure he stays okay.
Right.
That's what the gospel is trying to explain to people that, listen, you fighting for the wrong team. Like, this ain't your team. Like this he ain't even for you. Like, you really fighting your enemy. I mean, you fighting for your enemy. And Christ's example is you don't have to do that. Listen, Satan him and to kill, steal, and destroy. He come to kill you. You gonna die. And because you gonna die and not ever experience true life. See, that's the trick, is that we are the ones responsible for our sins, not Adam. Adam responsible for causing this problem in the first place. Because had Adam not done what he did, then we wouldn't have had the knowledge of what's right and wrong until God taught us.
Right.
I believe when Adam eats of that tree, it's almost like he the law is created at that point. Remember, when God creates everything, it's good. He didn't say the tree was bad. He didn't say if you eat off it, it's bad tree. The tree ain't bad. The tree is good. That tree in the garden is good. It's there for a good purpose. Now, we don't understand it. At least I don't understand it at this point yet. But I know when
Well, we're
Adam
not
eats it,
told what it's for,
but
except
I
for
know
hey,
when
not to eat.
that's right. But I know once he eats of that tree, it seems like he's doing everything that it seems like he started to do things that look like we see in the in after the Ten Commandments are given. It seems like he starts to understand that he got to make sacrifices. It seems like he understands he got to be covered up. It seems like he understands those things. It seems like he started to understand the difference between a good son and a bad son. It seems like he started to understand some things that you know that he didn't understand initially. But,
Okay.
but I,
Well, so to try to pull this all back to the Calvinist issue in question, right? Calvinists and we would, I think, agree with Adam having like full free agency, the ability not to sin, and all that. I think I don't know of a Calvinist that would disagree with that, right?
said
That Adam as an individual was fully capable of not sinning
yeah,
in his innocence. Yeah,
that's their point. That God is, but I would disagree with them.
you would disagree with that statement that he was fully innocent, capable of not sinning, not disobeying the commandment God gave him.
No. See that again. That we gonna argue about that word, the command, right? The Calvinist says that command that he was given was the Ten Commandments. You saying that the command that he was given was what was the don't eat off the tree. I believe he could have not eat off the tree. I don't believe he could have kept the Ten Commandments.
Well, the way I read the Westminster Confession that you quoted was that he got that after he had sinned in the
No, 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 no,
disobedience of the commandment.
no.
Did I misread that?
The Westminster Confession is saying that the law that God gave Adam is the Ten Commandments. That's the law he was
In
given
in the garden.
Yeah.
before he ever transgressed, before he broke any commandments. The commandment that was given to him, law that was given to him, was the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, see, and that's where I say the Calvinists they muddy the water by going extra biblical. God said, "Look, all these trees are good. That tree over there, don't eat it. Everything else, you good."
They saying that let me read to you. Let me read to you a Calvin. Let me read to you a Calvinist point of view right here, real quick. He broke the first commandment in his unbelief. He broke the second. I mean, as the Reformed have rightly noted, unbelief was Adam's first sin. He broke the second commandment. God was to be worshipped in a particular manner, which included what Adam was commanded to do. He broke the third commandment. As the son of God, God image bearer, Adam brought dishonor to his father. He broke the fourth commandment. Adam disobedient kept him from entering his eternal rest, eternal Sabbath rest. Oh yeah, that craziness that you're seeing in your face, that's exactly the point that they making here. And I can keep
Is
Yeah.
going. They going down to the Ten Commandments,
is
and
that
Yeah,
so
from
but
the Creed book you wrote or read? I mean,
no, that's not from the
something
Creed book.
else.
This
Okay.
just from one Reform blog, Reformation 21.
Yeah,
but that's
it's been too
that goes
long
back.
since I've read those things. I don't think I've heard that from. Now, see, I read maybe a moderate Calvinist rather than staunch Calvinist because it would get on my nerves too quickly.
Well,
But that's
anyone that goes to the Westminster Confession or the Westminster is gonna, if they hold to that belief, then they're gonna hold to, I mean, to those standards. Then they're gonna hold to the Catechism, the larger, smarter, shorter Catechism, and the Confession of Faith. And in the Confession of Faith, chapter 19, chapter point 1, it clearly says. Let me read it again. It clearly says, God gave Adam a law, and then that law is called a covenant of works. So he gave him a law as a covenant of works. So you got to do these works in order to obtain salvation, by which he bound him and his posterity to personal, entire, exact, and perpetual obedience. So you got to keep it, and all your children got to keep the law, the Ten Commandments. But you don't know it's the Ten Commandments yet. It's a
Okay.
life upon the fulfilling and threatened death upon the breach of it. And endued him with power and ability to keep it. And then it says, this law, after his fall, continued to be the perfect rule of righteousness, and as such was delivered by God upon the Mount Sinai in 10 Commandments.
Okay, but to my point, they state right there that he was endued with the power to keep
The Ten Commandments.
if they believe the Ten Commandments and
Yeah.
whatever law was given to him, he was able to keep it.
And I don't believe
which
that.
that which that which but the funny point is that's even more confusing because they don't believe he has a choice. So how do they believe he cannot do it if they
Well,
don't
let's see.
believe he has a choice?
That's sort of the
No,
direction
no,
that
no.
I'm trying to get to.
Wait. Okay, Calvinists say Adam has free will. He's the only man that has free will.
Oh, that
Give,
just made yeah,
yeah,
that's even
give it,
more retarded.
you will.
That's
Well,
even more
I think
retarded.
that's
That
what I was getting at was is that Adam has the power to uh, do whatever God has commanded him to do or to not do. He
I
can
agree.
cannot
It,
do what God said. Do not do this. Whatever it is, maybe in 10 weeks he would have added another commandment and say, okay, now you can't do this either. It just we don't know because it never happened that way, right? So that would all be speculation. But the point would be at first that they Calvinists believe he had the power to not sin, even if they believe it's 10 Commandments. And I would say I could agree with that even that he was innocent. He had the power just not to sin.
I
Okay.
disagree because he's
Well,
sinning. He technically sinning by being naked.
but not if that wasn't a command that he actually had. But that's what
Exactly.
we're talking about, and that's what I'm saying. Is
right.
like I'm saying he had the ability not to do whatever, and I would say even now, man has the ability to not do a thing that they recognize as wrong.
That's it.
It's always the case. That's why I can't go with like extreme total depravity because we're
Right.
not sinning constantly in every last little
Right.
thing, you know.
Right.
But anyway, that's there's a range. But going back, the part of departure between us and the Calvinists then is the Calvinist says when he had free will, he violated the commandment or the whole commandments, whatever, um, and therefore became a sinner, subject to sin,
Mm-hmm.
and to pass sin along to his children. And then all of us, inherent with sin, are leaning towards sin, and we don't have the capacity to not sin
So
ever
again, I
or
think
to whatever
we keep
degree.
we keep using sin as if it's like this verb that we do, but I think we also need to understand the connotations of what sin is. Sin is not just a verb, but it's a description. It's more of a adverb or adjective in a sense that it describes what the person is doing or has done or is, right? And so the reason why that's important, and it may seem like it's off putting at first, is that sin is just a missing of a standard. There's a standard and you didn't attend to it.
It's a
The standard,
violation of the standard.
huh?
It's a violation of the standard.
Right, right. Either way, okay, we could argue about words, but the standard is don't eat off this tree. If
Hmm.
you eat off that, that's it.
So it's a
Now.
verb and a noun. You do the sin, and the thing that's done is sin.
But it also describes the person as a sinner.
Well, yeah, sinner would be an adjective.
Right, 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 right. And he doesn't sin a sin that is great.
Okay, so I was coming again from saying the perspective or the shift or the departure between Calvinists and those that don't believe the Calvinist version of the doctrine
Yeah,
would be Adam was capable, innocent, not did not have to sin, could have remained without sin.
yeah.
I don't know how many ways to say it that way, but that. But once he did sin, and
God doesn't give man the 10 Commandments so they can stop sinning.
I know.
Because
Right.
that he giving them the 10 Commandments so they'll know what sin is.
Hmm.
And
Right.
then that because he know they're gonna continue to do it, so he makes ways out around it. Hey, when you mess up, we're gonna do this sin offering. We're gonna do this burnt offering. We're gonna do this offering here. When you mess up, but there were some that if you did them, you know what? They were premeditated. There were some premeditated sins that God just wasn't having no place of. And he was like, you know what? If you committed adultery, you took time to think about that. If you committed murder, now that one became funny, right? Because if you committed murder, you're supposed to die. But then if you committed murder and and it was an accident, then you could flee to a city of refuge so they could figure this thing out. What I'm saying to you is God start looking at the premeditation of what is actually happening, and then some premeditated things He still allowed for. If you took somebody's ox, you know what? Now you got to pay him back a double portion of the ox if it died or if this thing happened. So God made it look like an eye for eye, but He's saying, listen, if you did something wrong, remember you should go above and beyond to fix what you did that was wrong. That is the human spirit that He's trying to bring out of them. The law was trying to show you that there's grace and mercy that could be extended, that God kept extending. But I would say to you that there was some, like adultery, like homosexuality, there was some like witchcraft, that there was just no place for in the community because it spread and caused other problems. But Adam, in the case he's in, God doesn't tell Adam things that he cannot do. He don't tell Adam about the Sabbath because Adam ain't got no comprehension of the day, of the week. He don't tell Adam about coveting because he owned everything. He don't tell Adam about what you say? Why?
Interesting thought. He owns everything. There's no covetousness.
What could he covet?
This is what I always say about the Garden of Eden. I always say about the Garden of Eden. There are 4 people in the garden, and this is how marriage should look. This is how marriage looks every day of the week. 4 people in your home. You're gonna have God. You're gonna have you. You're gonna have your wife, and you're gonna have the devil. And that's every home. Your children are the devil, and your parents and everybody else who want to get into your life and tell you what to do with you and your wife are none but Satan. And the only people that tell you to love them. I remember one time I called Carleaf complaining about June, and Carleaf was like, listen, I don't want to hear that, dude. I'm telling you, you either love your wife or you're gonna find out what life really about. That's what he told me. And you know what? They go a God-fearing man saying some truth, even though he was wrong in that situation. But the point is it was good. It was good advice. And the same thing I continue to say is that in Adam's situation, he owned everything, and his wife still wasn't happy. He could have given her whatever she wanted, and she still didn't care.
These freaking women.
Eve sinned without any commandments being given to her, and she wasn't. We don't see Eve being the one being punished initially. Eve eats this thing. Eve don't go put no clothes on. Eve don't say, "Hey, I'm naked." Eve don't say, "Oh, you know what? I messed up. I feel bad. Let me go hide from God." No, Adam grabs his wife and says, "We better go hide." Adam go get some clothes and put them on his wife because she is clueless about what just happened. So what I'm saying is the commandment is given directly to Adam. Adam only shares the news. He shares the good news, and then he shares the bad news.
I was gonna read this because we were talking about definitions, and I always go to this because of conversations with Calvinists about sin. And to your point, which you said was right. 1 John chapter 3 verse 4: Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. And if you stray from that definition, then you're right. We treat sin as this arbitrary, this thing that just came out of nowhere. Well, it's a thing that it's a violation of the law. This is what sin is.
Yeah, but they hone it down. They hone it down to the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments got a whole slew of things in there that I mean, it don't have every single law in there. So, for example, I would say would have been okay for Adam to commit bestiality because that's not in the 10 Commandments. You
Right.
see? So and I'm not going there with them as far as the the suppositions. I'm trying not to make no suppositions. No. I'm not trying to bring any other thoughts in there besides what's there. But if you're really looking at what they're saying is God didn't tell Adam he couldn't do nothing with the animals, but Adam inherently something inside said, "Listen, even though I got these animals, I'm still alone." There was something inside Adam that says, "I can't do nothing
They're
with the
not like
animals.
me. Yeah.
They not
Right.
like me." That's what Adam knows. Adam could look and think about some things. God didn't tell him, hey, you can't sleep with Adam. Adam just inherently knows some things. But there's some things he don't know. He don't know he's naked.
So
You know,
it would seem as though the Calvinist position is Satan's position.
yeah,
They just want knowledge.
that's Calvin's position. Calvin's position
Yeah.
is that before Adam ever, like, they don't believe, they don't, a Calvinist will tell you straight up, when Adam ate off the tree of knowledge of good and evil, nothing happened. He just ate off of it, and then God came and was mad. That was it. There was no new knowledge given to Adam when he ate off that tree. That's what the Calvinists will tell you every day. Every day. There was no new knowledge. There was nothing new that Adam gained from eating off that tree. He just broke the 10 commandments. That's where the problem came in. That.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's
So
Well,
so
and
not
we got away from the question that I was asking though, and or trying to get to ask a couple of things, but um, and maybe my one point or question is moot anyway, because if they say he was capable of not sinning against God, and in some sense we're agreeing with that, all three of us, that we are capable of obeying God. We
Mhm.
have that capacity, we have that free will. But Calvinists depart from that doctrine. Once Adam sinned, the whole human race comes to where their will is in bondage. They shall go the direction of sin. Um, in I assume every case, other
No,
than being
they
interrupted by God, saved, has the Spirit of God in you. That's a different question.
yeah.
But man himself, uh, they say he's incapable of not going towards sin. You're saying, and I would say at least to an extent, that we're capable of not sinning against God. Um, Now I'm not sure how far I would go, but to me, uh, that that's like you said or indicated, and I think Carleaf got it, was God's sovereignty, and He's made a plan. Did He not then say, "Okay, Adam, I've told him not to do this, and I've given him the capacity to where he's not necessarily going to do this, but I've also chosen that he's going to do this at this time, sin, and plunge the whole human race into sin. He's planned all of that ahead of time, and decreed that it would happen. All the Calvinist words for it." Um, or do they not believe that for Adam, and it only is? That's where
which
my
makes it
confusion will come in.
yeah, which makes it and I think here's the crux of the matter, and this is why there's certain conversations I just abandon, because I understand that there's certain things that I don't comprehend. Imagine me getting into a debate with someone about God having no beginning and no end. Like, how do I end that discussion? Like, I'm not getting ready to debate this with you, dude. Like, you think what you want. The Bible says something, from everlasting to everlasting thou art God. Check. I believe it. I don't comprehend the ins and outs of that. I believe it. End of story.
Mm-hmm.
I think Calvinists are in that category. Like, you they are making arguments based on suppositions on things that are not explained. But their suppositions contradict the Bible. So it's like, you can't just make Darius, you made a supposition that doesn't contradict the Bible. I can easily see that being true, right? David being an illegitimate child makes it. There's a lot of verses I can go to that show that. Why is David treated like he's a nobody? I'm actually just reading through First Samuel, and you can tell David is like why are they treating David like this? Like Samuel comes up, and he's like, "Yo, homie, where's your other son? Like, you got another son? Well, yeah, but he's in it. Well, why didn't you bring him? Why was David left out in the cold when Samuel was coming?" So you're making a supposition based on some Bible evidence that we can actually go on. Calvinists are going beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
They're making suppositions based on things that's like, bro, I like we could debate this all day long. I could sit here and have this debate with you, and we could never come to a conclusion on this topic because there's no verse I can go to. But what I can tell you is the conclusion you came to is not biblical. Now, beyond that, I'm not getting ready. And that's why I said I just cut the conversations off. I'm not getting ready to go back and forth with you about this.
Yeah, and I don't mind. I learned a lot from this. I learned a lot from this back and forth. I mean, it's the way I actually gain proficiency in the argument, right? So I don't know that I'll gain it just by just reading their stuff because it's so dry, and but I do gain proficiency by arguing with them so that I am prepared when I meet somebody who is genuinely interested and wanting to understand. But we all, I'm not like y'all. Y'all have gifts that I don't have. Like I only learn by argument. I mean, I won't say only, but I mostly learn by disagreements. And so since I mostly learn by disagreements, that is it is important that I find these things in my life where conflict. I realize in my life I've been having all these conflicts in my life, and I realize that these conflicts is because that's how I grow. Like that's how I become. That's how I've become the man who I am. God has used that in my life to mature me, and others mature in other ways. Don read a book, and he pick up a book, and he can read it 13 of them, and then understand, something from it. You know what I'm saying? And how that happens with him, I have absolutely no idea. You know what I'm saying? And Carleaf, you'll sit down, man, and I'm talking about you'll take a verse, one verse, break it down. It take you 30 minutes to get through one verse. And you done broke it down. You done told us what A said, what B said, what 3 said. And then you look at each word, each definition, and you break it down. Like I told Don one day, I was like, how in the heck he's still in Acts for the 3 years? Because you know how to break that something to is nuances. Well, I wouldn't care about those
I'm a
nuances.
simpleton. That's why.
And everybody got these gifts that are differing from each other. But mine
Right.
is that I like a good disagreement. Even if I'm right, I don't mind somebody disagreeing so I can see how right I am. And maybe if I'm even wrong in that right.
Yeah, you have a patience I don't have for. I need more patience when it comes to debating with a person, but I'm not gonna lie. Once I get into that circular territory, I'm liable to tell a person, "Shut up, the argument's over."
Well,
Like, "Shit, I'm not talking to you no more."
it's because the depthness that you look at each thing, so it becomes exhausting for you. You looking at every detail of what somebody says, it becomes exhausting. Well, I don't care about some of the details. Some of the details don't even mean nothing to me. I'm able to look past that to get to the main point. Again, that's just the difference between us, right? I
Right.
can't. I'm not gonna spend an hour on no verse. You either get the point or you don't. You see what I'm saying? It just that's just the way it is. I'm not gonna read 13 books to understand a thing. Not happening. Just not happening. But we all got our we all see the value though, because like for example, we sitting here and what you doing, Khalif? Well, hold up. So what Darius is saying, I mean, you done dissected everything I said, dissected everything Don said, and you have concluded, hold up, y'all making the same point. You just missed it, Darius, because you don't care about the details. You see what I'm saying? It is that I'm telling you, we all got our own superpower that God has given us. I mean, that's the reality. But
That superpower need to make me some money. What you talking about? What superpower?
no. We don't need no money
All
for the
right,
gospel.
Shazam.
This is what we bring to the table as it pertains to the gospel.
Yeah.
You know,
I have an extremely, and this is something I need to pray about. I have an extreme annoyance with Calvinists, and it's growing increasingly as time passes. And I don't know if it's the smugness. I don't know if it's the arrogance. I don't know if it's the, like you said, the words. Like I don't really care. I'm familiar with words they use. Like I'll look it up. Like, oh, what's that word? I've never heard that before. I don't care about none of that, man. Like it, and the only reason I don't care about it is because you're using a word to circumvent the argument. And I'm not interested in that. Like, are we talking about this issue? Or I have talked to a Calvinist and we wind up debating a word, got completely off the doctrine. I'm like, bro, I don't like, forget the word. Who cares about that word? What does this verse say? Like, drop the word off a cliff. The word is not in any of these verses. Screw that word. What do these verses actually say? And that's where I'm at. I admire your ability to keep talking because, oh my
We
goodness,
got
man.
patience. Again, I think we all got patience in different ways. Don is patient enough to sit and read a book. You patient enough to do a podcast, and I'm patient enough to be in an argument. That's
Yeah,
you know, I mean, and then
I
all
don't
three
got
of
it.
us patient enough to go verse by verse of a book. I mean, and we utilize all three of our skills. Don's, I've been noticing like we get to something that say Bible or knowing the Bible or looking at the nuances of a thought that somebody has thought about. Don to call it out, and I noticed that when you are very good. I think out of all of us at just honing in at exactly what we're talking about. You'll be like, so what are we saying? Or is this? And yeah, that makes sense, Darius, or that makes sense, Don, if we look at this verse. And then what I'm saying is we all have this different talent that's now coming together for this little podcast that helps us, one, talk with each other about biblical things, but also share with the world outside how to study the Bible in three separate different ways. I don't know.
The
I
body
think,
fitly joined together.
yeah, I know. Think we all got I think we all got I don't know how to say it. I'm not trying to flatter anybody here because I do at times I am jealous at both of y'all different abilities that I don't have. You know what I'm saying? So in some ways, it's like I wish I could read a book. I wish I could sit down and read, 5 sermons or books on blah blah blah, or sit down at a podcast and then just be so fluent. I mean, it's not Khalid. You don't do just a podcast, or you do a radio show, a podcast. You do studying these. How many books you done studied? Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Psalms, and you studying all these different things, and you making all these different connections. Like I don't have that. You got to give me a book. I take a book. I ain't studying Psalms and studying Proverbs no. I'll study Hebrews. I had to read that book this week, the Creedal Imperative. I ain't look at Hebrews at all. If I wouldn't have been given that book, that's all I did was Hebrews. I don't have
Right.
that. I can't multitask like you. I can't go and say, you know what, I'm gonna do a podcast. I'm gonna do Acts the podcast. I'm gonna do Romans, my other ministry. Then I'm gonna come back and do a comic book on this other thing. Then I'm gonna come back and do Hebrews. No. I don't know how you do Hebrews, Acts, Romans. I ain't got no knowledge for that. I don't have no ability for it. I wish I did. And you keep it all steady and straight in your mind. No, I hone in and focus on the thing, and that's just where I'm at. And I can't. I can multitask, but only I can do that most. But everything is surface knowledge at that point. I don't
I'm
have no.
faking it till I make it. That's all.
Yeah. Ain't nobody on this call faking it. I can tell you that. We ain't no
Now,
fake.
to what you're saying too, I mean, when I got saved, I people came against me in all kinds of things, but usually that came with them handing me a book, or a book was available on the subject. So somebody said something to me, and instead of maybe like you just talking to that person, I took the book and I said, "There's okay. I'm gonna pretend like this is the person because somebody wrote the book." So I'm sitting there reading it, and I'm like, "Okay, go to that verse." Oh, that's wrong. Tulip. Okay, no, that verse does not say what they just said that it said. So that scratch that out. Now they have no verses to support what they're saying here. That's how I learned in the conflict of that. And I got away from Calvinism a long time ago because it's just like, yeah, like Carleaf said, I'm done. At some point, I'm finished arguing with you about it. It's
Like,
just no
Yeah,
point.
I can't take
see,
it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it because I want to argue back. Like I when I was reading that book just this week, I was like, man, I had to call. I called you and I called Khalid just to argue with you about what I wanted to argue about. And that's the truth. I'm like, I need
That's
somebody
why
to
I
argue
didn't
with.
pick up.
That's
Hey,
Don was
God, these
like,
things.
Don was like, Darius, and I see Calvinist argument under his name. Now I'm good.
I'm listen, I'm being, I'm being, I'm being as real and I be needing somebody to come. I'll be like, push back on me. I don't care. You know, you ever saw that? You ever saw the movie Pitch Perfect?
Yeah.
And they go to the they go to one of the competitions, and an older uh uh um acapella group is outside, and they taking donations, and they talking about you know basically, they are older group or whatever, and they get into a fight with the guy with the girl group, and the guy's like, go ahead, just hit me, man, just hit me, kick me as hard as you can, and that's how I am. I'm like, push me, man, just man, hurt my feelings. It's okay. I just wanna see if I'm strong enough to withstand the hit, or do I need to readjust what I'm thinking.
I have a hard time debating in real time without being able to sit down and think about something. I can't do that.
Mm.
I can't I well, I'm not gonna say I can't do it. I need a lot of time to think about a complex issue before offering a real response. I can
I
offer generic surface level response,
Whatever. Y'all full of
but
it, man.
no, Darius, I kid you not. Like a lot of the things, like some of the things you say, I've thought about before, so I can answer because I've
Mm.
given it thought. But like yesterday, what was it? What was it you asked me yesterday? We were talking about something, and I was like, man, I have to give. I haven't thought about this. Like
Mm.
I'm gonna have to like actually sit down and formulate some kind of idea of what the Bible says about this issue. Here's what's funny about you bringing up Pitch Perfect, and I know this is only God has done this. My memory for things like even I love comic books. A lot of the stuff I cover, I have to go back over before I start my video because I don't retain any of this stuff. The only thing in my life that I've ever been able to retain like consecutively and memorize things is the Bible. That's it.
Right.
That is literally like I can read a comic book right now. You ask me about that comic book tomorrow, and I'll be like, "What comic book? The one that you bought? You read? Oh, yeah. I'll have to read that one again before I do a video because I don't remember." Like the Bible, I can read a book right now. You can ask me a question 2 months from now, and I'll go, "Yeah, this verse right here. Let me go to it. Yeah, I remember reading that." And I know that's only the Spirit of God because my memory is not like that.
Right.
My memory is not that way at all. I need time. Somebody ask me something or challenge me or push me in real time, I'm gonna have to be like, look, man, I'll get back with you because I don't know how to answer that. I would not be a good live debater.
Right.
I prefer I would prefer you give me something, give me a week to think on this, and then I'll get back to you. Because I'm definitely not gonna be able to just off the cuff answer you
Oh man, I
just
live.
sitting here.
And live debates are supposed to be that. You're supposed to have some correspondence back and forth, and you know what subject is you're going to go over. You're not really surprising each other. Like a Kent Hovind debate is it's the exact same thing every single time. His opponents should know exactly what he's going to say, and they do know what he's going to say, and they still fail to catch him in anything because not everything he says is right, but generally speaking, along creation lines, he's correct. And it's like he's done it so many times, he knows what the argument is.
He's heard him.
So
Yeah.
yeah, they're not bringing anything new to the table, or when they try to, they say they say something, and it's either in a realm. But anyway, again, but that's what live debate's supposed to be. You're supposed to talk back and forth, off the cuff debates or spontaneous debates. That would be really tough. I agree.
Yeah. I don't
I would
and
have
that's that
you have to have a lot of knowledge to try to do something like that.
a lot, and that's why I don't do like people. There, like I've had conversations with people where they want to challenge a certain issue. Like, well, what do you think about this? Give me your number and give me a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
you just out of nowhere ask me something that I haven't thought about. Like, what do I look like? Some kind of infinite knowledge bank? No,
Yes.
it's, it's,
Got your
it's not gonna work.
question. I got you. Oh, I ain't
Yeah,
got you yet. Okay, next
right,
week.
right. Yeah, Malik said that the other day. He was like, Dad, how do you know all this stuff? I said, Malik, I'm an information junkie. I know random bits of information that don't mean anything until they do. That's why I just
Yeah.
random things interest me, and I'll remember enough that I know if you ask me a question, what exactly to go look for, then I can give an answer. But yeah,
No,
just
I remember you did something on Hosea, and I was like, I mean, I was having, I mean, I had read through the book a few times, and I thought I understood it. But then I listened to your Hosea message. But it wasn't a message; it was just like you going
my
over it.
podcast. Yeah.
It was a podcast just really highlighting what you was about to do. You took the whole podcast highlighting what you was about to do, and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I never thought about like how that, yeah, we really don't know what kingdom is. Was it Hosea? I think it was Hosea. It wasn't Hosea. It
Yeah. I
was
think
it
it was
Hosea?
Hosea.
No,
Yeah.
it was Nate. It was Habakkuk.
Oh, Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Yeah. I
And
do remember that one.
and I was like, yeah, you know what? I didn't believe I could say which kingdom it was, but then when I listened to what you said about, it, I was like, oh yeah, I never would have thought about it like that. That was actually a pretty good a good way of looking at that this is possibly the kingdom that was coming against them. This was possibly what was going on at that time. And then I went back and read it again. I was like, that was actually pretty cool. And you done did a lot of times. A lot of times I done came to and looked at one of them like, eh, Caliph was on chapter 7 like last year, verse 3. Now he had verse 16. So, and I'll sit there and listen like, oh yeah, that was actually pretty good. He actually made a great point. That's actually pretty good.
But that's
Is
how
this a
long it.
radio show or in Brooklyn?
No, this be
Yeah.
his this be the
my
the
my podcast. Yeah, my
uh,
YouTube podcast, and that's because it's not because I'm anything great. That's because that's how long it takes me to think about something. I'm slow.
Hey, and
I got
I had some other things to kind of mention to you and see what your thoughts are on it and stuff. Have y'all
okay.
ever? It's kind of an interesting exercise, or maybe it's just to me that I get this. I was looking up like Baptist preacher libraries, that kind of thing, library tour, Baptist preachers and stuff like that for a while, and I was sitting there watching, and it kept on a recurring theme. And I started finding out, okay, that's a Reformed Baptist we're talking about right there. That guy's a Reformed Baptist. And they got these 4 volumes of dogmatics. It's always the same thing. I forget the guy's name now. It's not Barth. It's another guy. And and then they have sets of various commentaries and all this stuff from Banner of Truth, basically. Brand new looking, beautiful. I mean, the library looks gorgeous. I don't think these guys have read anything that they're looking at. You open up the book, there's some underlining. I think they had somebody like guide them through it. Okay, underline this portion right there. All right, skip 20 pages. Underline this portion. Things like that. It's really neat to me that they have all that stuff, and it's like this, but it was the same thing over and over and over again, and it's like to the point. Those are the people that you're arguing with, Darius. Is that they have the same books that they go to. They've got their reference, and they learn a particular way to argue a particular thing, and that's it. They won't go anywhere else but that.
You
And
know what I
you catch them off
realized?
guard there, you'll mess them up
Yep.
real bad.
yeah,
What I
that's what I'm noticing.
what I
Now,
realized throws the Calvinists off guard is when you're just thinking through the Bible. They don't know how to process that.
They believe that that's wrong.
That which is
Yeah.
crazy.
well, that and if you read this
Crazy.
heretic right here, you know, if you get that,
Finney, is that
that
Who's
Finney?
that?
they'll tear you up.
Is that Finney?
That's Finney's lectures on
Yeah.
theology. Two
Oh,
volumes. It's been abridged into a smaller thing than even one of those, and even that is like deep thought. And I read through that. I was like, whoa, this is oh my goodness, this is an amazing thought here. But again, a bridge. I get to go dig through the 2 volumes. But
Listen,
this
I
this is anathema maranatha for the.
listen. I had enough time with 200 pages. It was pretty, but
Oh,
that's
it's pretty
what
good.
that's what I love about C.S. Lewis books. They are so he finds a way to contain a lot of thoughts and condense it so I
Mm-hmm.
can get through it quickly. And I'm like, man, that I find that fascinating. Like mere Christianity, I'm not gonna lie. That's an impressive book. Just because the amount of complex ideas that he dealt with in a very decent way. Like I don't know if I could have done that good. Even at points where I didn't agree with him wholeheartedly, I was still impressed by his ability to tackle all of that stuff in such a concise way and
Mm,
make the book so short. I was like, I would have wrote probably 5 volumes on that first chapter. Like, I don't know how you did that. And just get like I got exactly what you were saying in that one brief chapter, and I got the full point and was able to move to the next. It'd have taken me forever to do that.
yeah.
Mm.
I don't like books that are too long. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I don't mind. I like a good subject. Even if it's a good subject, and I don't even mind if I disagree with the author if they write well. This last author didn't write well.
I can do sci-fi, a long
Mm.
book,
Yeah, no,
but
no.
Mm.
when it comes to like and the problem I have is so, it's rare that I find someone writing on like a Bible topic that doesn't go off into their own like you can talk about these things in long form and you could because I realize like if you look into okay, who's the original audience? What was going on at the time? What were the conditions of the time? Like there's a lot of things you can go into without necessarily like things that are not necessarily mentioned in the Bible, but they're not extra biblical. But what I find is a lot of these guys just it's like, bro, I was good. Your first point, I was good. And
Mm-hmm.
then you went into this thing, and I don't even know where you got this from.
Right.
Like, I'm still struggling with how you got here, who told you this, where'd you get it from, what caused you to go there. There's a book I read that I actually I this is one of the few books that I actually like really like. It was A.W. Tozer's The Attributes of God.
Yeah, that's a
I
good one.
thought I thought that was a really decent book, man.
The Tozier or
Uh,
Pink?
it was Tozer,
Okay.
The Attributes of God. Yeah, that was and I think it was it wasn't a book he wrote while he was alive. I think it was an amalgamation of different sermons he had that somebody put
Okay.
into a book, if I'm not mistaken. But it's that's a good one. That's a good one. It he there was some stories in there, he gets into, his stories and different things, but I think he stuck close enough to the Bible that I didn't feel like he was just going off on this. Okay, well, how did you get this? Like, how'd you even get here? Some dudes, I'm just like, I read a book and I put it down. Like, I'll give you an example. I believe the King James Bible. I believe the King James Bible is the word of God preserved, period. But there's some people who write on this subject that I'm just like, bro, shut up. Shut up. Like the way you argue this, don't ever open your mouth again. Because you make everybody who believe the King James Bible look stupid. Just shut up. Just don't say another word.
Hmm. I was gonna ask you their names, but I don't know.
There's one. What's the chick's name? I have one of her books. Um,
You talking about Riplinger?
yeah, yeah. Like you're like, how could you be so right? But then just like she makes a lot of good points. But then sometimes she just like jumps off a cliff like a lemming, and I'm like, you didn't have to say that. Like that, like
Mm.
you went into a direction that was completely unnecessary, and now you sound like a crazy person. Like you made a very like she'll make a really good point and then go, and now we're gonna jump off a cliff. Like, bro, what are you doing? Like you didn't need to say all that.
Right.
Your first point was perfect. It was right. It was accurate. I agreed until you jumped off the cliff. Yeah, that
Hmm.
she annoys me because she's right about so many things, but I don't know if it's just maybe it's just the way she argues. I'm just like ah.
I can agree certainly with some of that, and then there's things that she talks about that I throw up my hands and say I don't know about that subject. It's the kind of thing where It's just beyond me. I could see maybe it's true, and people that have gone into that realm may say, "Yeah, that's true about whatever I've studied and say," but that's not a necessary connection for certain.
Mhm.
If it
Yeah.
is true, that just simply means, wow, that's kind of rough. That's dangerous. That's but it's beyond whatever I would need, and that's that's kind of the vast majority of where I line up with her would be that. It's like she goes to a point and then goes somewhere where I normally say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about there." And
She yeah, she gets too
I don't
she
know. That
gets
may be the
too
jumping off the cliff parts that you're talking about.
yeah, she gets too subjective. Like you're talking about something, you're making a dogma statement about something that no one can prove, but you're
Hmm.
saying it dogmatically. I don't like that. Like it's unnecessary. You can just
Yeah.
say, I believe this is a possibility. And I would be like, oh, but she'll be like, no, this is exactly what happened. I'm like, okay, shut up. This is where I just tell you to shut up. I
Uh,
think I can't remember his name. Um, he works for Chick Publications. Why can't I remember his name?
David Daniels.
Is it David Daniels?
Well, Daniels
Older,
is
older, older gentleman. He
yeah.
took over. He took
He's the
over
main
directly
guy
for
now.
Chick. Okay, if that's him, I think he makes better arguments.
Hmm.
And the reason he makes better arguments is because homie comes with receipts.
Hmm.
Like he says things that I can go look up myself and verify what he said. Like, oh, I did not know this. And I just looked into this. And yes, what he said is absolutely correct. I sourced all that material. Yes, okay. I don't like just making an open point. When I got saved, I will fully admit I did this a lot. I just make a dogmatic statement, and I learn really quickly that look, there's things that I think, like Darius said about David, like this is my supposition, but here's what I think is the point. I appreciate that because I'm like, you didn't make a statement of dogma. You said this is a likely possibility, and here's some biblical evidence for why this is a likely possibility. I'm with you. I'm rocking with you. But just to make a dogmatic statement you can't prove with nothing to back it up, yeah, Gail Riplinger loses me with that every time. I'm like, because you make people who legitimately believe this look bad because you're just spouting stuff you can't prove and you look like a crazy person.
Yeah, most people that follow up with that are not. That's what I'm saying. It's like usually it's that new age witchcraft and stuff like that, which it had been my um assumption that she came out of that mess, but
I
apparently
think
she
she did.
didn't. And
Oh, she
apparently she
didn't?
didn't.
Oh,
So the way I've listened to various things is she was looking them up as she went, and just that's and that would be like several others that go along that same route, maybe Tex Mars or something like that. They have a way of they look up something, it looks suspicious, and instead of saying, "Hey, this is suspicious," then they come to conclusions about it, and that's yeah, they carry things like you're saying dogmatically, uh, in those wrong or right directions. Yeah, who knows?
yeah, it doesn't matter. Like
That's
I
beyond
don't
me.
right. I don't mind the thoughts. Like, hey, here's a possibility. This is something I was looking into, and I don't know if this is what it is, but this is a weird connection.
Hmm.
I don't think I would have no problem with that. I would have no
Well,
problem
and
with
the
that at all.
idea too with that is if you could study the groups that they would be talking about, and those groups have the errors anyway, so you don't need to make the connections. It's just
Right.
it's that, and I've always looked at it that way too, saying uh, so when people argue. The King James Bible people say that everything's a conspiracy. Say, yeah, it is. It's Satan's conspiracy, and he's working in all these groups however he wants. That's his
Facts.
devices. And yeah,
Facts.
they're all working together in a way from him, not that John MacArthur has spoken to the 33rd Grand Master of the Lodge or whatever
Right.
they are,
Right.
and head of the Ku Klux Klan or everything else that's out there. No, it's like no, that's not the conspiracy we're talking about. We're not talking
Right.
about every different person in all the different schools are colluding with one another. No, they've just at some point in their history they started deviating toward the devices of the devil, and they came to the conclusions that other people also came to, who also deviated following some of the same information. Now that I can see going back and saying German rationalism came in, and that's where people went, started going off. And then I can say, hey, looking at all these libraries carrying the exact same books, and they say, well, I'm a Bible believing Baptist. And then about a few months later, they're like, I'm a Reformed Baptist. And stuff like that. Like, there's a conspiracy there. It happens to be what's, behind you on the shelf
Right.
that's conspiring uh, between the two groups of people or other people. And yeah, they never meet each other, but they're still in a conspiracy. And in a loose form of the word conspiracy, I guess that
Yeah.
should be a
And
loose form, but
it should. And I think it's agitating because there's people who are truly interested in these topics, right? That really want to know. Like if somebody asks me, why do you trust the King James Bible so much? And people have asked me that. And I give them a thought out answer. Well, here's what I've researched over the years. Here's some of my resources. Here's what I believe about this issue, right? I believe God's word is pure. I believe I have a complete copy of God's word. I don't believe at any moment that it was somehow lost and then regained. That doesn't make sense. And it's inconsistent with what the scripture teaches. So that leads me to believe, okay, well, one of these things is true, one of these things isn't. Well, which one is? And you go into some of that research, like David Daniels pointed something out that I didn't know, and this was actually interesting because when I looked into it, I was like, why is this? Why don't people know this? And it was about the Codex Sinaiticus and um uh uh what's his name Simonides, I believe his
mm-hmm.
name was. And uh going into the fact that he said, hey, this is actually something that I actually did, and here's how it got there. Now I thought that was just all nonsense. I looked into it, it was like, holy crap, yo,
Mm-hmm.
this is, and that's what I mean. He came with receipts, said something that could be verified. I went individually and verified it, and I was like, yo, this is crazy. Like what he said wasn't ever actually challenged. They just wrote him off. And he was
Right.
like, yo, I'm ready to have the debate wherever you want to have it. And I will prove that that is what I did. That is my work. And I will prove it to you. Never debated the dude. Just wrote
Right.
him off.
Yeah, I read as much as there was kind of available at the time
Right.
back in the late '90s, early 2000s, or whatever. I was like, hey, this guy Simonides came in and said, oh, and they just totally wrote the people in the years where they were at that could have looked up things and found them out, just dismissed it. Said, oh no, that guy wasn't there. There's no truth to this thing. And they didn't look it up. And I'm like, wow, I see the same attitude all the time with people dismissing claims anytime. Oh no, that never happened. Da, da, da.
Right.
It's and things that can be verified. And yeah, only recently David Daniels does a whole YouTube thing. I don't know if you watch the YouTube thing
Oh
on
yeah, I
him.
do.
So if you watch
I
his
watch it for the
YouTube series of
receipts.
it, he shows all those receipts. He's like,
Yeah.
this was not available to you, 30, 40 years ago,
Right.
but it's available now, and it was available to them then because that's what they were, was these scholars that went different places. They knew where that place was. They could have just gone there. And supposedly some things have been found even more recently where they've opened stuff up, and you know but for an English speaking person to go in there, they're not going to get any of that. They're not going to
Right.
comprehend any of the thing. They don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
And that's where the argument is. We have the argument because we're sitting there debating about the subject, and there's not really very far we can go without more information or somebody that has
True.
that ability. But then again, now we've got Google Lens and Translator and all that stuff that's going to make that a little bit easier, and we can all, you know, work
There's
toward
a
it.
right. There's a lot of resources, and I even like on covering a book on my YouTube channel. I always let people know I'm thinking through the scripture. You're joining me on this journey of thinking through the scripture. If I can't prove something biblically, I'm not just going to tell you dogmatically this is this. I'm going to say, hey, here's what I read. I've looked into these other verses now reading this, and I have this thought. I'm flushing this out. Right there. Now, I could go out on a limb and say the Bible says this right here dogmatically, and Don, you can send me a message 2 seconds later and go, hey, bruh, there's about 4 or 5 verses you ain't think about. You might want to revisit that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem. Like, why do people have a problem with just saying, I have a thought, but I'm not sure about this thought? Now, there'll come a point where, like, if you've exhausted an issue, right? Like Darius talking to the Calvinists, you've exhausted some of these issues. So you're like, no, I've looked at what the Bible says about this topic in totality. I'm ready to defend this position. You're ready to defend your position with receipts. You're not just randomly saying, no, I think this, and then you give no receipts. Like, if you did that in a discussion with a Calvinist, you know what they're going to think? This guy's a moron. Now, they probably think that anyway, just because that's how they think. But I'm just saying, you come without receipts, you look crazy. Just saying something just says you look crazy. And that's a lot of these books. That's where I get lost. I'm just like, okay, I was following you, and then you just started saying stuff, and I'm just supposed to believe you because you're a PhD, you know, whatever. I don't care what your PhD is in. You better provide me some receipts,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't believe a word you say.
Mhm.
Provide me for some evidence for why you think this thing, or I don't believe a word you say.
Right.
And that's my problem with Gail Riplinger. And there's a
hate
lot
it.
more. It's not just her.
Yeah.
There's more.
And that's the thing about her is that, well, and she didn't necessarily bring out a lot of stuff. She made it popular along with some other people at the same time. There was just this realm, but you go to older books, you actually get the same kind of ideas and stuff without jumping to the new age stuff necessarily.
Right.
So, um, yeah, that's the problem with it. She presented or was able to present to a populace stuff that was a little bit harder to access or find, somewhat because people just dismissed them. They said, no, forget this guy. This guy is off his rocker or whatever. Dean
Right.
Burgon, we don't listen to him at all. And you know to an extent anyway, they'll say that. But I was going somewhere. I was going to try to say something. Getting into details. Only recently you can find this out. You can go and look up the Vatican Codex B and now see it, right? You couldn't do
Right.
that just a few years ago. But you can do
Right.
that now. Now, if you go back and read the books that say this is the Codex B has this portion of the scripture, and from this portion to this portion, it doesn't include the Psalms, and it doesn't include this part in the New Testament, and stuff like that. You go and look at the manuscript, and you're going through, and you say, okay, we're done with Job, and then we hit there's Psalm 1. There's Psalm 2. There's all these Psalms. It's written in a different type of hand. It's all written in like it's all written in Greek, right? But it's written in block letters and majuscule characters for those that understand the textual question, and abbreviated and all that. When it goes into the Psalms, it's in cursive, and it's the next page. It is connected in the book and goes through the
Yeah.
Psalms that way. But they said it was left out because it's not in big letters. Back when they could tell you that, and you couldn't look at the manuscript and say, "Well, why
Right.
is this here?"
Right.
Then they're like, "Well, I don't know." it was How do we know it was from the third century? Oh, because it's all in majuscule letters. Well, what about these portions that are written in cursive? But I couldn't
I
tell them that. But nobody said it in the you know in the scholarly world, because only certain of them were allowed to even look at it, and the ones that looked at a copy of it were only given the portions they were able to see. And so they say, okay,
right.
we're judging it based on what we see, and we're just assuming that they're telling us the truth about all these texts. But you can actually look at it online now and see how it's filled out throughout the whole thing. And I think it was Erasmus, writing in Greek and Latin and saying that's a 15th century or 14th, 13th century manuscript. Not even 13th. It's like 14th century or later manuscript, and that's a medieval manuscript, and it's written in certain places for sure, translating from Latin and stuff like that. And that's obscure because I don't read Latin and I don't read Greek, so I'm not going to pick up his Greek annotations and Latin
Right.
context and say, "Hey, there's where he said that." And then, of course, later on, we now have the ability to pull that thing up, and somebody can dig through it slowly. Other scholars have finally, you know, there's the scholarly works that cost hundreds of dollars become available somehow, and then we can
Right.
look it up, and somewhere they admit, "Oh yeah, he said this." And it's like, yeah, that's the conclusion other people were coming to, without knowing he said that too. And it's very interesting. We live in a different age.
I I was confused because I actually looked into this, how they dated Codex Sinaiticus. The
Yeah.
conclusion, it's because Constantine van Tischendorf said, "Trust me, bro."
Hmm. That's
I
always
was
been the
like,
case.
"What?
Yep.
What?" Like this is what I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is such a deck of cards." And the thing
Yep.
is,
I read that
I'm
over
not
and over again, and
it's
we defer so
crazy.
much in the arguments that many believers, King James Bible believers, we just say, "Hey, we'll give it to you. We'll just say maybe that's from the third century. If it is, these are the problems with it. We got to throw it out anyway." So it doesn't even matter that whether or not it's
Right.
from third century. Some people argued it was some of the 50 books, the 50 copies from not Constantine, the ruler, Emperor Constantine. Is that it? Is that wrong?
Yeah, you talk about the one who declared Christianity the
Yeah.
state religion. Yeah, Constantine.
Okay. So I'm just mixing that
Constantine
with
the Catholic.
Constantine van Tussendorf. And, no.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so is it some of his? Well, they he would people abandoned that pretty quick, but it still comes out every once in a while and says that's what it is, and it's like no, because I think what it was is they wanted to push the years back further and say it was older than
Right.
that even, so they abandoned the 50 copies version of the argument, but it was like, well, if they are copies, then why do they disagree so tremendously with each other?
Right.
That was the point. And they say, well, let's just give you the idea that it is what you say it is, Mr. Hort. If it's that, your same argument is still saying the received text is just as old and older than these copies. So you got nothing. You got nothing for age because they're all old. And one of the
There's
arguments was all readings are old readings, and that's like, okay, yeah, they all go back to the first few centuries of Christ, uh, in the church. That's it. So I mean, you got no argument for antiquity. You only have some witnesses here and there, all over the place. And so they make up other arguments, which they abandon certain arguments that they were doing 20 years ago. They're saying, "Oh no, that's not our argument anymore. We can't argue that." And they,
I I I
it's
o-
weird.
I often think about I watched a documentary from British Institute of something, I can't even remember, done in conjunction with Cambridge, and they did a history of the King James Bible. And this is purely secular. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is not a bunch of believers, purely secular. Good, like very informational. And I the thing that strikes me, and this in and of itself doesn't mean the King James Bible is it just because it is, but it is something that is very convincing when you look at the dudes, the collection of different people involved in the translation, and really and truly of different doctrinal positions, some outright heresy. But the thing about many of them is they were expert linguists of multiple languages, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't necessarily an effort of my doctrine or your doctrine. It was, yo, I am a pro at this linguistic thing, and we got to get this right. When you read behind a lot of these dudes, like, yo, they was ready to go to blows over this translation. Like, no, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. This should be translated this way. And there was like very heated debates about getting this right. Okay, that in and of itself doesn't mean that the King James Bible is the end all be all. But then when you look into most modern translations, bro, the callous or the carelessness
Mm-hmm.
in these translations is like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
I agree.
I'm all the way good. Some
Yeah.
dude just took a year off and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna translate. New translation. Okay, here you go. A year and a half. Nah, bro. Nah, bro. I'm good. I'm good. You can
Yeah.
have that." And that's what I mean. Like you can make legitimate arguments from these positions, things you can actually prove and source and go to. And when anybody asks me questions about the King James Bible, I go to a lot of secular sources. Like, hey, here's a source right here. Read behind this right here. Here's what this person said. Here's what was done. Here's like I'll go through a list of the translators and their accolades. I'm like, yo, these were not slouches. Some of these dudes spoke like 12 languages. So
Mhm.
much so that people thought those were their original languages. That's how well they spoke these languages. Like these dudes were giants of
Mm-hmm.
linguistics. It's like and I don't know if people understand that. Like if there was a group of men that would know how this should be translated in English, it was probably that group of dudes right there. It was probably them. If there was a group, it's probably them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
there's and
mean, and those that come after them that actually do understand these languages are in substantial agreement with them. We hear about people that are professors saying something different. They got it from a book, or they got it from somebody who has disagreed,
right,
or they pulled it out of Strong's, or you know,
right,
something like that. But if you dig into, I may disagree with some things in like Woost's word studies, but you go into some parts of it, and it's like they get in deep, and it's like, wow, that's completely contrary to what modern criticism would try to tell you it's supposed to be, and it agrees absolutely with what the King James Bible is teaching, and yeah, we gotta hold on to that, But it, yeah, that's
I
it's
got I got
amazing.
into a I got in this was early on in my podcast. And it's the verse in the book of Isaiah about a virgin bearing a son, right? And this was random, and this didn't even have anything to do with the King James Bible at all. It was just some Jewish rabbi that was like, this is a handmaiden, and it shouldn't have been translated this way, and the English Bibles are wrong. It should just be handmaid. It wasn't a virgin, because of course they're trying to disprove the virgin birth. So that sent me on off the deep end, looking into this verse, right?
Hmm.
Looking into, and
Which,
it
which,
led me to, what'd you say?
oh, the handmaid. Okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. So like I went so deep just on the word. Took me to the translators, and I was like, so why did they translate this? Then when you get into the context and what was being said, and why would it have been a sign or a miracle that some random handmaid had a child? Like that kind of doesn't make sense. So then the translators got into how certain words, like linguistics, were different then, and there wasn't necessarily different words for different things. The same word could have meant something different depending on context.
Mm-hmm.
So then you go back to looking at that. So what would make this a sign? Well, all handmaidens were virgins. You were, if you weren't a virgin, you weren't a handmaiden at that point. So when they
Isn't
looked
that the
into
point,
that
isn't that the point of a maid? Is that she a virgin?
yes,
Is that the same terminology used in Proverbs 31? The maidens of our home. Blah blah. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I believe so.
I'm listening.
But to your point though, so now when you go back to the translators, why would they have translated that virgin? And you start getting into the genius of these dudes.
Mm-hmm.
You understood the language enough to know, okay, this word is used, and yes, it means this, but we have a word for that they didn't have a word for then. That word for that in that context is virgin. This is someone that hasn't had sex with anyone. That was the point. That's why this was a sign. That's why this was such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it led me on such a path, right? That's now something I can point to based on the research, what receipts that I've done, and point people to something and go, look into this. Here's why this was translated this way. Here's the resources you can use. Like, these dudes weren't slouches. This wasn't a game to them. I didn't realize how seriously those translators took the translation until I actually started looking into it. I was like, oh, these dudes was straight up almost into blows over this. Like this was a big deal. Like, they were. I think if there was ever a movie done on that and it was accurate, it'd be like watching WWE. Like, these dudes was ready to punch people in the mouth. Like, nah, you wrong. We not getting ready to let you translate this way. I'll punch you in the mouth over this. Like
I mean, you could look at the notes that they gave to us in the beginning of the King James to see that they took a great pride in what they were doing, and even tell us why they didn't use some things over other things. So,
yep.
you know.
Yeah,
Hey, if
it's
you can find the link to that, send it to me so I can find what exactly you watched, the documentary.
oh yeah. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
done. I
thank
want
you.
to say it was done by like the British
Mm-hmm.
Institute or something. It was like for the 400th anniversary of the King James Bible. It's on YouTube. I'll probably find it right now.
Yeah. I know I watched one, but it didn't go into the kind of details I think you're talking about. But I may have to watch that one again. But there's been others, so
Yeah,
um,
I've watched a bunch, Dom. Like, I went on a whole, like, I think as a matter of fact, the whole year I was in Texas, I went on like a whole YouTube articles, because for whatever reason I kept getting videos from this dude, this Jewish, what they call Jewish rabbi Tova or something like that. Like, his videos kept, for whatever reason, getting recommended to me. And I was getting so annoyed at what this dude was saying. I started doing all kind of like research and going off the deep end. And it just, yeah, it was super beneficial. It was super beneficial. And that my argument for what I believe is more refined. So
right.
it's not on emotionalism. It's like, no, there's evidence behind what I believe. This is not emotion, and there's evidence behind. I'm gonna say this, and I've had this discussion with people and had this debate, and why is it that all of these other texts, it's always something found in a monastery every single time? You ever notice that? Like, nobody finds that weird? Like, that's not weird. Constantine van Tischendorf, oh, found this in a monastery. This other dude over here found this in a monastery. Why is it always connected to Catholics? Why is it always a monastery? Always some ancient text found in some monastery where monks were and they had. Now, does that mean that everything that comes from monks is inaccurate and everything they had is inaccurate? I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying there is a line from every translation back to some monastery.
Hmm.
I'm
Well,
The,
just
I
saying,
mean,
no,
my
the big
immediate and giving answer to that would be there were the libraries of our time. Just that's where you go to get books and information because they stored them and they made sure they were there. And probably most of the monks were just like, we're just copying this book out. We know how to do it, therefore we do it. Or they were skilled in being able to copy the letters, even if they didn't understand the language they were talking about. Like I could copy out a Latin text, typing it up, but I wouldn't have the clue what it was saying necessarily. A few words, but that's the you know
fair,
that would be kind of my answers. Like they just had them. It was a collection of stuff, and the better ones, own more learned of them, were more like Erasmus and the direction of Erasmus. In fact, Erasmus was part of that in some way or another. Um,
fair.
but uh, but yeah, it was they were some of them anyway got studious. And I was going to say to the point of that translation too. For those that don't go into the deep dive of it, the easier, quicker answer, if you will, is that verse is being quoted in the New Testament, and people understood Greek better than they understood Hebrew. A lot of them, even more recently, not even too long ago. And the word used in Greek means nothing other than virgin. That is the
Right.
meaning of it. So therefore, in back translate, if you will, to Hebrew, that's the word that he was saying, because Matthew told us that's what it said, and he
Right.
was a Hebrew. So,
Right.
um, I mean, but that's the beginning argument, and enough people will accept that argument and not have to do a deep dive. But the people that do a deep dive just find more and more and more and more and more reasons for all these things, like you're saying. Um, and yeah, and we got off to the King James Bible's issue. I'm not exactly
I don't
sure
know.
why.
I
We were talking
I
about
well, because we
Calvinism.
were
I was going to publish this
exactly.
as a impromptu Calvinistic discussion.
talking about books. That's why.
Books.
And I
Oh,
was
and I
just
was going
making a
to get
point that
into some more book statements, but no, that's okay. I think I
I
said
just,
what I needed to about that. So, like that's what I was given, like Darius was saying, and so that's how I argued. So when people come to me after, I'm like, I read your book. Oh, you didn't write a book. I'm sorry, I read the book you read. So let me tell you
right.
what you're about to say. Say yeah, okay. So and the same thing with the King James things. Like people came at me for that, for just believing and quoting the King James,
Right.
and was like, da 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 da. Read James White's book. I said, okay, I'll read James White's book. Why is this dude lying? I mean, why would you have to lie to? This is absolutely the exact opposite of my life experience in what he's saying. It's like, okay, or whatever. He's just flat out. So when I started out with him, some people mentioned him, and I said, that dude is an absolute liar going to hell, as far as I could tell from there, because all I saw was lies. And I don't know how you lie that much without being lost. So I don't know. Maybe James White's actually saved, but I doubt it.
I don't think James White is a Christian.
I don't think so either.
I never looked deeply into him. I
Yeah,
know
I hadn't
watching him to
either. I just read his little his
yeah.
little book. I was just like, yeah, how do you lie that much? He will come out and actually say things like, look at how many manuscripts we have. We have all the manuscripts that we have, all these great manuscripts. And we look at all the manuscripts and we come up with this new version. Like, yeah, yeah, all the manuscripts don't support your new version, James White. How do you say that with a straight face?
Right.
But yet he does it. He did it on that wicked or wretched podcast or something. He was asked a
Oh,
question,
yeah.
and you watch that answer. It is like it's all King James argument to come up with a modern text. I'm like, how in the world Do you don't you laid the foundation for something completely different than you're standing
Yeah.
on. Like,
And
wow.
you made a point that I've always found confusing. Like when I got saved, I preferred the King James Bible, right? This is what I was learning under. To be honest with you, when I was growing up, the King James Bible was the only Bible my mom ever had in the house. I never asked her
All
why.
of again.
I tried to read it. I didn't understand what I was reading, so I would pick it up every now and again and close it. So as far as verses are concerned, this is all I've ever seen and heard verses out of, even though I did not grow up going to church. But when I heard the Bible, it was the King James Bible. I was unfamiliar with the whole textual criticism and all of that when I got saved, right? So I got saved and I didn't really have a position, but I'd hear people teach and preach and say things out of other books. And I remember Lev saying, bringing up the arguments about the King James Bible. And that's the first time I heard it, but this is all I've ever known, so I didn't have a problem with it. But what confused me is I noticed right out the gate, like, why is everybody attacking me because this is the version I use? I haven't said anything to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm reading my Bible. What is your problem with me using this verse? And that's what made me start digging into it. Like now I'm confused. Like, I didn't say anything about that version you were using, but you heard me at work either quoting this or you saw it on my desk, and all of a sudden, oh man, you don't need to be reading that one, bro. What happened? What's going on? And I think there is something to be said for that, because okay, this is a subjective argument. I'm willing to admit that. But why is it that every version seems to be translated specifically to address the King James Bible? That always seems to be, and that's subjective. Like I said, I admit that, but that always seems to be the case. Now,
the
this
evidence
is
for that is their prefaces where they state exactly that. It
yeah,
says King James, but we got to update this because it's old language. It's like, well, what
and no,
happened to that ESV from 3 years ago? Oh yeah, you
I'll tell
changed
you,
that one too.
I'll tell you the problem I have with the what's his name? Ward, is that his name? He says the false friends.
Oh yeah, Mark Ward.
Yeah, the problem I always have with that argument, and I've heard it enough times, and he's like, "You don't know what you don't know." Okay, okay. I remember reading across the verse where it says, "Now he that now letteth." Now I read that and I was like, "Wait, let? I know what that word means, but so I went and looked it up. That's when I found out that word let didn't always mean the way we use it now. This is stuff that you can look up. If it doesn't make sense, you can look it up and find out what this word means. So when he uses that argument, I'm like, nah, homie, I don't think that argument stands because we can look up words. So I don't understand what you mean here. Like, I don't understand what you're
And
talking about.
it doesn't hold up just because every single book you would ever read, and I know this because that's what when I read a book, it would use a word I didn't understand, so I'd mark it and put it on the side, and I'd go to the dictionary and write down, okay, he's using this in this context. This is what this means. Whatever book we read. So what does that
Right.
mean? We can't use that word anymore. Now we'll be dumbing down to the point where the Bible has to read see spot run. And we're still
So
not
now
going to
you're get
understand that because I'm going to have to put an asterisk and say Spot. Spot is the name of the dog, not the spot on the dog, please. Or, oh, this dog doesn't even have a spot. What am I talking about? That's just his name.
Within his name with
It has to be so stupid that nobody could read it anyway.
so
And we
then
can't do that.
you get to the point. This led me down such a rabbit hole. So then I was like, why the attack on words? Yea, hath God said? And I kept going back to that. It's always an attack on words. Instead of just saying, hey, we have a dictionary. I keep a Noah 1828, Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. Why? Because those definitions are more close to the definitions that were used when the King James Bible was translated. It wasn't exactly from back then, but you can get closer to what those words meant. So it's like there's resources that we have for this.
Yeah.
Like
And I
I
don't think that it mistranslates any obscure word or defines rather any
I don't
obscure
either.
word. It would have it available in there. It's there. The word that Mark Ward goes to is halt. And like I never misunderstood halt. What are you talking about? And he says,
Yeah.
"Oh well, it means to stop." Well, if you look up the definition in a modern dictionary, the first definition says stop, and you're saying to halt. And the second definition is something. And the third definition is lame or limping on as in a halt on your leg, kind of thing. Like that's a modern definition. Duh.
Right.
Or are you just telling us we can only have one definition per word now, Mark? Because if you're
Right.
saying that, you have just destroyed the English language. You're going to have to go into the dictionary and say, no, you cannot say this word means, cleave does not mean to split apart or to unite together. It cannot mean that.
Right.
Either or, you can't have opposite
Right.
meanings. You're crazy, Mark. Insane.
Right.
Mark is a crazy man. But he's convincing only when you listen to him for the first moment, and then it's like, wait a minute, let me peel back one layer, the translucent layer of the onion, the one that's all curled up and rotten. Toss that away. Now I see he's just like that's a bunch of nonsense what he says,
What
and
what what really this is what got me one time. And I don't necessarily take it personal, but I kind of do take it personal. Somebody said how was it put? I don't want to put words in people's mouth, and I can't remember exactly who said it. It might have been Ward, might have been somebody else. Maybe he made the same argument that arguing that it would be a sin to give a kid a King James Bible or give anyone a King James Bible because it's not intelligible. And they use the argument from First Corinthians chapter what's that First Corinthians
14.
about, is it chapter 14? Here's the issue with that. Here's the issue with that. Now, and this is just my initial thought when I heard it. I was like, I think you could have done something interesting. What happened there? I was like, Peter said that Paul wrote things that were hard to be understood. And some men wrestled with these things to their own destruction. So if the argument you're using is it has to be exactly intelligible, then what you're saying is what Peter said was wrong. Paul should have revised what he said and made it more palatable however he could have. Somebody should have made that thing. I'm like, no, I think there's some things that are just going to be hard to understand that you're going to have to think through. It's not going to be, oh, I read over this verse, I understand it all, and if I don't understand it right away, then you shouldn't have gave me this version because I should have been able to understand it at first glance.
mm-hmm.
For me, that's a really lame argument. Would you say, Darius?
I take it a step further. I mean, really, giving the Bible to anybody who ain't a Christian, it should be illegal if they want to put it that place because nobody really understands it unless they have the Spirit of God.
Right. There you go. Bingo. 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 And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and that's funny because he just condemns himself because he came up with the King James Bible himself.
That's what I don't.
It's like your arguments don't hold water, and
I'm
he knows it
confused,
really.
man.
But one of these days he'll either come out and say, "Yeah, I was paid so much money, I just had to lie to everybody," and come out telling the truth, or he's going to say, "I don't know how I was so deceived to believe those things that I believed. I was just totally blinded." But I think in either case, he's going to have to be. He would have to be coming out claiming to be a believer. Then he claims to be a believer now, but to say
I'm not.
these
Yeah.
things, it's like, where are you at when you say those kinds of things? Honestly, questioning stuff is perfectly fine, but to
Yeah.
know
Agreed.
the answer already,
Agreed.
and then say that answer doesn't exist or is completely illegitimate, like, come on, it's
I will use my own I'll use Brooklyn's situation as an example of an affront to that. Like and of course, this is subjective. This is my life experience, but Brooklyn got saved. I didn't tell her what version to use. We went to the bookstore. Don, you're not gonna like this, but we went to the bookstore. She wanted to buy a Bible and she bought an ESV. Okay, whatever. We're over the course of like maybe 2 or 3 months, we're talking about Bible issues. I'm helping her through, some doctrines. She's drinking that milk. And one day she was just like, I don't use that ESV anymore. And I was like, oh yeah, really? Explain. And the reason I approach this way, I don't want any of my children to come to a doctrinal position because I told them they should come to that position. Now I'm going to explain and expound what the Bible says, but you got to go search the scriptures and see whether these things be so. It can't be just because I said so. That's not good enough. What have you seen? Now I'm going to instruct you as well as I can. But anyway, side point. We randomly talking about this. Like, this is not a conversation I brought up. I gave her, after she got saved, I gave her the first Bible I ever owned because I still got it. So I gave that to her. She bought that ESV. She was like, I don't use that ESV anymore. I was like, oh yeah, I'm curious. Why not? She was like, I noticed it doesn't say what the King James Bible says. I was like, explain. She was like, it's not just like words arranged differently. It's saying something else. And it actually doesn't make sense. And she was like, I find that when I read the King James Bible, the way it's worded, like that actually makes sense. And when I go back to the ESV, I'm just like, no, that's not what that says. I didn't tell her any of this. This is conclusions she came to on her own. On her own. So it's like, okay, if what he's saying is true, is she just some kind of superior human to everybody else? Like just some superior human that could open the Bible and read it and somehow, without me saying anything, without me pushing, without me prodding, that was all her conclusion. That's when we had the King James Bible discussion. And that's when she started looking into this stuff herself. Like, yeah, nah, these other versions, I'm not rocking with them. I'm good.
That's good.
She was like, I'm good.
And just to clear my name, now first you said she bought it, right? You didn't pay for it.
Well, I did pay for it. It was my money at the
So
time.
I'm gonna go in on the assumption that she paid for it herself, but I wouldn't have a problem. My children buy whatever they want to and read whatever they want to. I have other versions in the house. They probably don't know where they are because it's like I got an NASV, a New King James, and a revised version, like two of them, and maybe one or two others, right? A Living Bible and something else. And among the other 80 or 90 Bibles or 115 now maybe, yeah,
Good grief.
they don't see them, so they're never gonna notice that they're there. And when they're gonna pick up a Bible, it's the King James, so from my house. So, um, but just I
I
wouldn't
like
I
that. I like
wouldn't
that slight rebuke.
I just wouldn't like throw them under the bus, as it were, and say no, you can't get it. I wouldn't do that to them. If they want to read something else, they certainly can. And of course, they've had um, uh, you know all kinds of electronic devices and stuff like that to get online, and it's all these Bibles are online anyway. So if they
Right.
wanted to look at, say, well, if you want to read that, you can get it from somewhere, but if you go to this website, you can compare these versions right there with each other. So I don't know how much they've ever done that or whatnot. I don't have the story that you've got, but that's a great anecdotal thing to respond to Mark Ward with, and many others. But and it's good to hear too. I like that. But um,
And I know argument is, I mean, the kids, DJ them, that's all they use the King James, and I make them read entire books. Like they have to read the entire book, and then we talk about it. And they never have said, "Oh, I don't understand what it's saying," and I find that amazing. I never have heard them say, "I don't know what it's saying."
yeah.
Never.
I this
And to
this is
me,
this is
it's really, I gotta get going to church here in just a moment, but to me, it's just that the King James Bible is as basic of English as you're gonna get. with anything else. It has some words
I
that's
think
just
so.
like, oh, what is that? Like you said, just look it up in a dictionary. But also, the vast majority of the time, you say, oh, that's what that word means. Oh, I see where we use that word in other contexts, and stuff like that. It's the words pointed to normally are that, like let is one of the very few words that's pointed out. And then
Right.
some other words that yeah, nobody necessarily knows unless you're looking it up in the dictionary. All right. But yeah, it's just the whole. Anyway, we got off in a tangent, and I can't stay with it with y'all. Y'all can keep going as long as you want to, though. And if you don't mind, I am going to publish this thing as this random conversations,
I don't. I'm
couple of
good
things.
at that.
There's no
I'm going that.
objection
Objection to what?
to me publishing this impromptu multiple conversations.
You been recording this?
Yeah, I've been recording it for about 2 hours now.
Oh goodness.